Hi everyone, today I'm talking about if there is going to be another stock market crash or if the stock market is going to go lower. And this is kind of the question that I've been asked the most over the last week, 2 weeks. So I thought I'd address this for you guys and give my opinion on it. And as always guys, smash that like button. And if you want to join Trading 212, there's a link in the description below where you guys get a free share if you join through that link. So I'm going to be covering 3 really key things here, which is going to be the stock market chart. I'm going to go talk about what earnings, which will be one of the big things that move the stock market going forward. And also we're going to be talking about how the curve or the peaking viruses, how that's going to affect the stock market. And then I'll kind of give my opinion at the end of the video, how I'm planning on dealing with this situation and how I'm going to be buying my stocks. So first of all, we're going to look at the chart, which we're going to look at the Dow because it's kind of the one that's always talked about. It's the one that comes up when the stock market goes down and CNBC are like, oh my God, it's down 10,000 points, and you get big capital letter notifications on your phone. So we're going to talk about the Dow to start with. So you know, on this channel about 3 weeks ago, I said that we were massively oversold and I expected a little bit of a bounce from here, and we got the bounce. And I'll be honest, I was only kind of expecting about a 10% rally. Now what really scares me is that we're up about 25%, and being up that quickly when we've had no significant news, we've had no vaccines, we have no countries that have kind of got through the peak of the virus yet, and we've got a 25% rally. Now I know the stock market is future thinking, and I'm generally a bullish kind of person on the stock market and believe the stock market will recover at some point, and you might just miss the bottom, but even so, we shouldn't miss the bottom this quick, and we shouldn't have a V-shaped bottom like how we're having right now. I expect to have more of a U-shaped bottom. So I do believe that we were oversold and we should see a spike, and then we could have potentially had a U kind of rally coming back from here. But this V-shaped bottom is very quick, just too quick for me at the moment, and I believe the stock market should be definitely a little bit lower than this right now. So for me, at these sort of prices, I'm not really buying, to be honest with you, because I think they're definitely gone up too quickly. And for me, when we look at the 21,000 point mark on this chart, that's probably where I would be looking at buying. Ideally, if we get below 19,000 points, that's probably where I would be starting to buy heavy again. But like I say, between that 21,000 range and 19,000 range is somewhere where the stock market should roughly be somewhere trading at, and that's where I would consider buying, and that's where I bought most of my shares previously. Now I think at that sort of point it's a very undervalued market. I think if we're only back 4 months ago where we were at the highs, we would have ideally loved to be at this kind of point. Obviously not with this scenario that we do have, but obviously as stock market investors we would like to buy at these sort of prices because this is where we would feel a lot more confident to make money. And that's kind of the range where I would be really happy at buying at. And like I say, I think that between the 21,000 and 19,000 range is where we should be, and then we should see a U curve kind of recovery from here that should take a year, not a massive jump that we've had. I think it's about 25% from these kind of lows, so that's where the stock market should be. So right now, looking at the chart, we are definitely really overextended, and we should see a pullback. So looking at the chart, I do think we are due a little bit of a pullback from here, and that's why I'm pretty much not buying any stocks at this sort of point. And like I say, that's where I would be looking at buying some stocks. When we look at the earnings, which is the first thing that's going to move markets from here, if earnings are quite good or okay, the stock market should do all right. It's if earnings are bad. Now we've started to have a few earnings from last week. J&J was kind of a big one, which we expected to do quite well, and it did. And we had the bank stocks, which actually weren't too bad. They were okay. So at the moment, the market hasn't moved that much off earnings last week because they were kind of in line. So there wasn't any surprises there. But looking forward to next week, we start to get it stuck into the earnings. We'll start moving markets and we'll see how well or how companies are doing over the last few months, because next week we'll start looking at big companies like Delta Airlines, Southwest Airlines, IBM, Coca-Cola, AT&T, Philip Morris, American Express, loads of companies that we'll kind of see how they're managing the situation, and we'll see how many of them start doing are doing okay, how many are struggling, and that will kind of take a little bit of interest on the market and where it moves next. So we'll kind of start that next week. And obviously the big one that's going to move markets from here is the double peak in the CV and how we handle that curve. Now this is probably the point where I'm the weakest at, because I'm not an expert in pandemics. This is probably my weak point, but I'm going to give my opinion on how I think the market and the CV is going to be handled over the coming few months. So I think everyone's expectations right now is that through May, we start to see the curve flatten and we start to get some sort of opening up again in June. And I think that's what everyone's kind of pricing in here. But where for me the stock market goes lower than 19,000 is that if we start curving, things are not opened up in June, or the second case scenario where we actually see a spike back up in cases and then we have a second lockdown. I think if we see them two scenarios where some companies aren't starting to operate again in June, that's when we're going to have the stock market go lower. And like I say, if we see that peak again, that's going to be the second thing that sends stock market lower, because then we're going to have to go back into the lockdown scenario. But at the moment, it's very hard to judge how things are going to go when everything kind of reopens. We're kind of looking at a lot of European countries right now. I know there's been China, but there's a lot of... Personally, I'm not going to trust the numbers from China because I'm not sure how correct they actually are. But when I start looking at countries like Italy, for example, Italy's a prime example of when Italy starts opening up again, how well are they going to do? How's that curve going to handle? Are cases going to spike again? And that's where markets will have a good idea where things are going to go from here. So from my kind of point of view right now, I've invested in that 19,000 to 21,000 range on the Dow. So I'm quite happy with the investments I've made and I've bought in. So if this was the market bottom here, I'm very happy with what I bought. But I've also got some cash if it goes lower because of these two scenarios that do push it lower. If these two scenarios happen, that's where we should see the stock market break below them 19,000 mark. So overall, I think the stock market should come down a little bit and then we should see a U-based recovery. So I do think the stock market probably go a little bit lower from here. But as terms of buying, to be honest with you, I'm looking at least to the 21,000 before I consider buying anything else right now because I'm quite happy what I've bought already. So as the weeks go on right now, I'll probably be building up my cash pile and just wait and see if it does break below that 21,000 mark on the Dow or the 19,000 mark on the Dow where I would start buying heavy. That's where I'm looking at the stock market. But in my opinion, we are a little bit too high at the moment and I do feel the stock market should pull back a little bit. And that's me covering the stock market today, guys. And if we're going to see another crash, I hope you enjoy the video. As always, like the video, subscribe if you haven't, and I'll see you in the next video.